El agua es ciencia.
Es música.
Es matemática. Es emoción.
Es lenguaje.
Es arte. Es el futuro. La comprendemos de maneras distintas, tantas como las formas en las cuales podemos interpretar el mundo. Mi amigo Pablo, mi amiga Ana y yo pensamos diferente, aprendemos diferente y esto nos hace únicos. Y tú, papá, mamá, lo sabes.
Somos curiosos por naturaleza y queremos aprender. En el colegio descubrimos cosas nuevas y hacemos proyectos basados en el mundo actual para entender cómo resolver los retos que nos proponen los maestros o que proponemos nosotros.
Uno ahí nos lleva a vivir una experiencia de aprendizaje emocionante. Y tú, papá, mamá, nos acompañas en este camino para ir descubriendo en qué somos buenos e ir explorando lo que queremos ser.
Con Uno I tendremos diferentes experiencias con la tecnología para conectar con el mundo y así aprender de formas emocionantes y retadoras para estar preparados para el futuro en un mundo lleno de tecnología.
Uno ahí me ayuda a conocerme mejor, a descubrir mis talentos y a entender por qué el miedo, el estrés, la alegría, la ansiedad y otras emociones afectan mi forma de aprender.
Hablar en inglés es maravilloso porque puedo comprender mejor el mundo, entender las películas y la música en su idioma original. Me puedo comunicar con personas en todo el mundo, hablar con ellos, conocer sus intereses y compartir experiencias juntos.
Lo que me gusta de Uno I es que nos enseña a resolver situaciones con los métodos de la vida profesional. Nos muestran cómo se define un problema y luego los pasos que hay que seguir para solucionarlos, gracias a una plataforma que nos guía y a la ayuda de nuestros profesores.
Además, aprendemos con sofisticados simuladores de laboratorios virtuales que incentivan nuestro pensamiento científico, lógico y matemático, con actividades gamificadas en situaciones reales.
¿Y saben qué es lo que más me gusta? Que puedo ser un creador de tecnología, con experiencias que me permiten descubrir mis habilidades para el futuro, de la mano de la robótica, el pensamiento computacional, la ciencia, la tecnología, la ingeniería, el arte y las matemáticas. ¡Es increíble!
Uno I le facilita a tus hijos la inmersión en la cultura digital
por medio de pedagogías activas como el aprendizaje cooperativo, la indagación, el aprendizaje basado en proyectos y el aprender haciendo, involucrando la robótica, los diarios de aprendizaje y la programación, entre otros, para conectar con sus intereses.
Vivamos juntos esta gran experiencia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Martha Ramírez. I'm super happy to be here today to talk to you about thinking-based learning from a practical approach. So I'm going to share my screen and we can get started. All right. Okay, so today I want to share my experience teaching different strategies of thinking-based learning in the most practical way possible. And I will be making some connections with my two passions in research, which are flipped learning and growth mindset. So to get started, I like us to start making that connection with thinking and mindset, because we're talking about thinking-based learning. So is that connected to mindset? And if so, what is that connection? So the first thing is, well, both of them, are inside our heads or inside our brains, right? Our mindset is our system of beliefs that's inside of our minds, and our thinking is that thought process that is in our mind as well. So if we kind of try to make the connections, our mindset is our way of thinking, right? And it is based on a number of beliefs about many different situations and aspects. So I'm just going to touch base a little bit on this, because in the strategies that I want to share with you, we're going to see how the mindset has to do with how we're teaching these strategies. So when we talk about mindset, I want to connect to two specific experts. One of them is Carol Dweck. She's the one who coined the term fixed mindset and growth mindset. And James Anderson has worked on these two mindsets based on Carol Dweck's work. And so what you're seeing here is 8 characteristics or 8 situations in which one or the other mindset appears. So just to clarify a little bit, when we talk about mindset, that system of beliefs that each of us has that takes us to have specific actions and make decisions, can be divided in the fixed mindset, which is our belief that intelligence and qualities can't change. So when we are in our fixed mindset, we're literally fixed, right, on that idea that no, maybe if I have to make an effort, I prefer to give up. Maybe if there's a challenge, I prefer not to give it a try, right? That's kind of the fixed mindset. And these characteristics that you're seeing in the middle of the slide are those situations where it could appear, right? Like, what is my view of the world? What is my reaction to feedback or criticism? Do I avoid it and feel threatened? What is my reaction to mistakes? Do I avoid them because I want to be perfect, or I avoid them so I don't look like if I don't know? No, so just these are some ideas of how the fixed mindset can be seen in these elements. And the growth mindset is the opposite, right? That belief that I can grow my learning, that I can develop my intelligence, that I can develop my qualities. And in these characteristics that we're seeing here, it's kind of, it's the opposite. So I'm open to criticism. I'm open to feedback because it's going to help me grow. I normalize mistakes. They're part of my learning process and my teaching process. I receive help because I know I can't do everything alone, etc. So I know this is just a little brush up of what mindsets are, but I will be reconnecting. So what I want you to stay with, if you're not too familiar with these terms, is fixed mindset. I believe, things are as they are. They're not really going to change. They're kind of static. Growth mindset, I strongly believe that errors, mistakes, and difficult situations lead me to continue growing. Okay, just to keep that in mind. All right. So something that I believe, and here I'm quoting myself because I love these slides that Julie offers, is that we need to be aware of our own way of thinking, right? So those of you who are connected here today, thank you so much for connecting here. to reflect on how we teach students how to think, right? Or how to be more effective thinkers. However, today I'm also going to challenge you as an educator, not only to think of how to teach your students how to think, but to think about your own thinking, or to think about your own processes before you teach them to your students. So definitely we need to be very conscious, ideally, of our mindset, right? Of our own beliefs before we start teaching our students how they should, or how thinking would become more effective for them. So I want to talk to you about habits of mind. Habits of mind are one of the strategies, or one of the habits that as teachers we can adapt in our curriculum, we can adapt in our lessons, in our classes, in order for students to, develop the habit of thinking in different ways, in different perspectives. And Costa Calic, and I'm not sure if the pronunciation is Smuda, or what they share with us is that there are 16 habits of mind that we can teach our students and that we can work on ourselves. So today, because our time is so short, I won't be sharing all of the habits, or I won't be going in depth in all of the habits, but I will mention them. So here you could see just what all of these habits are, and we're going to be focusing on about 8. If we have a little more time, I'll try to go in depth, maybe in 2 more. But I know that covering 16 is a lot for the time we have today. So I've chosen the ones that I consider very relevant and that connect to this reflection of our mindsets and our students' mindsets and their ability to think more efficiently. So the first one, we're going to go one by one, and you're going to see that you'll find the title of that habit, a message, right? That will prompt us to think, what is this referring to, or make us think a little bit. And then I will be sharing 1 or 2 practical strategies, as practical as some of them can be, for you to start applying them in your classes if you don't already. What might happen is, as I share these, you might notice, hey, I already do. Oh, of course, I've already done. That has a name. It's a habit. Oh, okay, cool. Or you might think, hey, I didn't know that was that. Okay, I didn't know that could be something that I can do. So there might be strategies that you already apply. If so, I recommend you to comment in the chat. I'm not exactly participating in the chat as I'm focused on this presentation. However, this space, the whole intention of this space is for you teachers, educators, to share, your experiences and to kind of have a conversation along the way as I share these strategies with you. So the first one is thinking about your thinking, right? It's metacognition. And that's the first, not the first one, it's one of the habits of mind. And it has to do with knowing what you know. And so how do we teach our students to know what they know? So I'm just going to share 2 ideas here. The first one is to use visible thinking routines. And you will receive in the chat a link to the specific visible thinking routine that I am displaying in this slide, which is I used to think and now I think. But there are many other visible thinking routines that develop students' metacognition. So you can definitely check them out. If you Google visible thinking routines, this is a page from Harvard, or a project from Harvard, you will find a list of, I think, more than 60 routines that you can start applying in your classes. Not all of them specifically towards thinking, but definitely all focusing on different skills. So one of them is I used to think, now I think, and it's basically you can use this as a warm-up in your classes. And, you can do the I used to think, like, or I think, what do you think now? And then you teach them the concept. And then you go into the, okay, what did you used to think and what are you thinking? Are you thinking the same, or has your have your thoughts changed? And that gets students reflecting about their thinking, right? And the other one is called an elbow exchange. For this one, you will also receive a link in the chat. This link has the details of how you can do the elbow exchange. It is a strategy thought, for face-to-face or physical classes, kind of, putting your elbows, literally like hitting elbows together. So it's intended to be in pairs or in groups for students to talk about what they think about a specific topic, and then to reflect whether they confirmed their thinking, right, or not. So it's kind of like the I used to think, now I think. It's a little more complex in the sense of the steps. And this is a strategy that Bondi and Susho, that's 2018, developed. They have a book on differentiation strategies. And so what you're seeing on the screen is me using this strategy in one of my classes in pandemic, and students, you can read some of these examples. They're saying, I noticed this as I talked to my classmates, like as we discussed this specific topic, now I'm thinking this and that. So there is an open space in your class to develop these thinking skills, right? So that's the first one. As I mentioned, I'm gonna bombard you with different strategies. So I recommend you can take note. Obviously, this is also recorded, so you can go back to the recording and keep in mind the links that will be shared in the chat, just so you can go a little more in depth, and so that this can really be put into practice, right? The practical part, so you can, even do it tomorrow. Okay, another habit of mine is thinking and communicating with clarity and precision. And for those of us who are language educators, we focus all the time on communicating, right? On teaching the language. But in any subject, we need to also develop students' communication skills. So here, we want students to be crystal clear. And as teachers, we should also be crystal clear. So how can we do this? What are, two strategies? And here, these strategies are for you, to apply in your own teaching. One of them is flipping instructions. And you're going to receive a blog post of a step-by-step of how this works. But basically, flipping instructions is when I replace the instruction that I say directly, orally, let's say, right? Instead of explaining the instructions, I design the instructions and I display them for students. And these instructions have specific characteristics, like what are the roles that students are going to take in a specific task? What is the task? What are they going to do by the end of this activity? How long are they going to take? How are they going to take turns if it's a group work activity, right? What are the specific steps? Is there a particular rule that I want them to keep in mind? And are there any language elements that I want them to use or to keep in mind as they do this task? If you want to look for, if you want to see some examples in the blog post that will be shared in the chat, you will see like specific designs of varieties of flipped instructions that you can keep in mind. I think what this allows for the teacher is crystal clear instructions, right? And for the student, crystal clear understanding of those instructions. Because if they have been flipped and they have been made accessible to the student in class, printed on a platform, wherever you can, through WhatsApp, wherever you can, you won't have the teacher, what are we doing? I don't understand, right? So it's not just the thinking process, but also the communicating process from the teacher to the student and from the student regarding the task that they have to do. The other one, from a teacher point of view, is piloting your activities. It's very hard to really know if what we plan to do is going to work unless we give it a try in situ with students right then and there, and then we make errors and have mistakes, etc. Or, we can pilot with colleagues, with maybe we have a group of teachers that we work along with, and we can send them, hey, can you check this out? So you're seeing on the screen a screenshot of me sending a diagnostic that I designed to a colleague of mine, and then asking her, like, hey, can you please check this out? And tell me if it's clear, if you understand what it is that you have to do, if there's anything, right? It's the clarity, because one thing is how I think about it and how I put it into a document or a format. And another thing is what my students are going to understand. So definitely piloting and flipping, from my experience, have been two strategies that have allowed me to continue developing that thinking and communicating with clarity and precision habit. Moving on. We've got the habit of questioning and posing problems. So here, it's about having a questioning attitude for the teacher and for our students. We want our students to become, questioners. We want them to be able to question all the time, and we want them to be critical, of course. That would be the term. And we want them not only to question, but also to be able to pose problems, to recognize when there are problems and to pose them so that they can be solved. So how can we do this? Here are some tips. Of course, there are many, many ways we can develop all of these habits. But here are some tips. So one of them is focus on open-ended questions. So as teachers, if we're asking just yes, no questions, is this correct? Yes. Is that no? Or just very specific. When was very specific factual questions? We're not helping students develop their thinking or their questioning or their, problem solving skills. So open-ended questions for different types of activities is ideal. Inquiry, or having, to inquire with students. So tell me when they present something, just having that initial, tell me how you came up with this, or tell me why are you saying that, right? So that leads the student to have to, you're questioning them, and then they have to reflect and share like that solution to that question, right? Super recommendation is not to give the answer right away. So we can always kind of throw the question to someone else, right? When a student says, hey, what does this mean? Oh, that's a great question. Who can tell me what this means, right? So kind of throwing the question back is also a way to develop this habit in our students, just to keep them questioning, keep them problem solving or thinking of those problems. And if we want to be more explicit, we can actually plan activities where the task is that students need to ask questions about, X or Y topic, right? I think sometimes, if not most times, from what I've seen, we tend to focus a lot on the answering of questions and not so much on the asking of questions, when it doesn't have to do specifically with language, right? Like I'm teaching questions. It's something I've noticed even in my own practice, right? That I've reflected about. I need to plan more more activities where my students can actually ask, and that is the task, to get them to question, And if we want them to become, problem solvers, well, posing problems for them to solve is a great strategy. Using case studies, giving them a case and telling them, okay, so everything we've learned, here's a case, here's a problem. Now show me how you're going to apply all these elements that we've learned in class to solve that problem. So I think case studies is always a wonderful strategy to develop this habit. Another one is thinking interdependently. And when we talk about interdependent thinking, it's thinking together, right? I mean, we're not independent, we're thinking together in order to solve or reach an objective that we have as a group, for example, or individually and as a group. So here we want to think together to grow our thinking, right? We need to work together, think together to be able to continue to grow these thinking habits. And we can do this in many, many, many ways. Some of the ways that I have applied it in my classes, and because my teaching approach is flipped and students access the content, autonomously, and I'm focused more on student-centered classes, then I have like more time to create interaction or interactive group activities, right? Like games, challenging games that make them think and have to solve a specific task or activity, or through gamification, for example. Of course, planning group work. I know that sometimes in our classes, we sometimes have tendencies, like I like to work with the whole group, or I prefer to put students in pairs. But here the idea is to vary that interaction, like, and to include group work. I know teachers who have told me, I don't do group work because my students are just too complex, right? So they're missing out on that interdependent thinking skill. And of course, try to get out conversations from any situation, just even if it's, okay, let's take 3 minutes, turn to the person next to you and tell them what you understood, or discuss this question. And if it could be something very quick, but the actual including conversations in our thinking is what's going to allow our students to, keep in mind the other person's perspective, and come to an agreement if what they're doing is, finding a solution to a problem, for example. In terms of reflection, peer assessment is a wonderful way of developing interdependent thinking, because if we are both developing the same task, right? Our teacher asked us to create a poster for a poster presentation, and we're both aiming towards the same learning objective in this class, but now we're going to peer assess what we're doing, not necessarily as an evaluation, but like, hey, let's check what we're doing and give each other feedback before we have to present to the teacher. Then that helps them, right, continue developing their thinking, reflecting, and of course, in the end, the task. This is something I do with my students, and it has had great benefits, because two heads think better than one. They give each other feedback and they improve and they reflect. And comparing is a great strategy. It could be as simple as, you're going to check homework, right? I assigned homework, and instead of giving the answer immediately, I'm going to ask students to sit together and take 2 minutes and compare their answers, right? And notice if there's anything different, or if someone wants to change the answer or convince the other person of the answer that they have. So they're thinking interdependently, right, towards that goal. And then I give them the answer. So it's a little step that you can add in your classes that won't take too much time, but that will make a big difference in students' thinking habits, as well as group reflections, right? Like planning moments of reflection as a group. It could be small group reflections, like reflect about this task that we're doing, or it could be a whole group reflection, right? So all of these strategies I have seen support or foster that interdependent thinking. All right, so I'm seeing a question in the chat, and it says, Valeria asks, what can we do with lower level students? Can they speak Spanish? That's a tough question. That's a tough question to answer, because it depends a lot on the policies of the institution, and it depends a lot on my beliefs regarding, code switching or translanguaging. So I would say, if your purpose, and you're asking, of course, as an English teacher, is for students to develop this habit and they're code switching, if the purpose is the habit, then, it doesn't really matter if they're using Spanish, English, going from one to the other. If what I really want to come out from here is that habit, right? If I'm creating the habit, then I don't see why whether they speak English, Spanish, or whatever, should be an issue, because that's not the actual objective, right? If I'm thinking as a teacher and, the policies and everything has to be in English, well, then of course I understand that this could be an issue. But if that's not what we're aiming towards, we're actually developing the thinking skill, and it's, and students don't have the level to, reflect or, peer assess it completely in English, then I would say, we could allow Spanish. However, we could also give them some language stems. For example, if they're going to peer assess, we could give them the questions that they can ask, or we can give them the sentences for them to share. Like, we can scaffold the process, giving students the elements they need to be able to communicate in the language. It takes, of course, a couple of steps, but they're definitely worth, if the aim is thinking, then I think it's definitely worth it. So yeah, my question is, it depends. It will definitely depend. Thank you for that question. Okay, another habit that I believe a lot of us educators are very, very familiar with is managing impulsivity. And we've heard a lot about mindfulness. I think just because of pandemic and because of confinement, mindfulness, became an important approach to include in our lives, and for some teachers in their classes. So there are, some strategies, of course, that we can use regarding particularly mindfulness, which is, if you want to be mindful, you can practice mindfulness. And there are different ways to practice mindfulness, which is basically to learn to connect to the here and the now. That's mindfulness, right? So when I'm super impulsive, or I'm worried, I need to make decisions, and I'm running, and, what people recommend is, okay, stop and breathe. Take a deep breath, and breathe in and breathe out, breathe in and breathe out. And the simple way is literally just stop and breathe, like focus on your breathing. However, there are many other strategies to practice mindfulness. There are ways of breathing, like you breathe in and then you hold for a couple of seconds, then you breathe out. You breathe in through, one nostril, then the other nostril, or breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your mouth. Like, there are techniques that we can learn as educators and that we could teach our students. So this strategy is for you, educator, and your students. If you want to, if you see that your students aren't managing their impulsivity, this is a thinking habit. Yes, because they're not being mindful. So they're being super impulsive instead of, slow down and, take it easy, take a moment. So I definitely recommend, if you haven't heard of these strategies, there are a lot of mindfulness GIFs or GIFs, which is the one that you're seeing here, that you can actually display to your student, that will like breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. And you can do that for a couple of minutes. This semester that I started face-to-face classes, like I guess all of us here, or most of us, I do 5 minutes of mindfulness when I get into the classroom. And I do it it's not mandatory, right? It's voluntary. So I tell students, okay, I'm gonna, do a 5 minute, short activity of mindfulness. For those of you who want to do it, please, go ahead, close your eyes, etc. Those of you who don't worry, just check your email or what, use these minutes for you. I'm not gonna oblige you to do mindfulness. But I've seen that my university students, most of them, they'll close their eyes and they'll focus on my voice, and then they'll breathe in and then they'll breathe out. And so it's definitely worth trying for you and, for your own students. Another one is reframing your possibilities. This connects to the mindset. This connects to your beliefs about your possibilities as an educator. Why? Because I could believe that my impulsive reaction is part of my personality. So remember we talked about the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. So the fixed mindset would tell me, Martha, you're impulsive. Like, accept it. That's who you are. You are an impulsive person. That's my fixed mindset. My growth mindset will tell me, Martha, you need to work on managing your impulsivity. You need to start taking some mindfulness, or you need to start writing on a journal, or you need to start fill in the blanks with the strategy to work on your impulsivity. So if you believe that your impulsivity is a trait that is fixed, obviously you're not going to react in a way to find a change, right? But if you are in a growth mindset and you believe, hey, I could actually learn how to be less impulsive, then you're developing this habit of managing impulsivity. Of course, it's because it's a habit, you have to develop it little by little, and it has to be something consistent so that it becomes a habit. Okay, so those are like the two strategies that I wanted to share. The next one is persisting. Persisting is a habit of thinking. Why? Here again, we connect to the mindset. When you keep at something, it has to do a lot with what you believe about what you're doing. If you believe you can do it or not, right? So to look at two specific strategies, one is to use your self-talk to hang in there. Yes. So my internal discourse, and this applies to you as a teacher, and this applies to students. As a teacher, if I become conscious of how I talk to myself internally, I will notice what happens when I'm in a situation that requires effort, right? Or a challenge. Remember some of those characteristics I mentioned at the beginning: effort, challenge. So do I give up? Like, does my fixed mindset appear and say, I'm going to give up? Oh, I can't do this. Oh my gosh, I'm useless. Like, what do you say to yourself? So use self-talk, use positive self-talk, right? To hang in there, not negative. Positive self-talk. I can do this. I'll keep going. Oh my gosh, this is super tough, but okay, I'm going to keep at it because I'm seeing there's a progress, even if it's slow. Or you know what? Oh, I'm failing. I'm making mistakes. I've had a lot of falls in this process, but I feel this is making me stand up stronger. That internal dialogue depends on your beliefs and depends on your mindset. So we see this a lot in our students. Our students, no teacher, I can't. No teacher, and you have this maybe a long task, that requires a project of the whole school year, or a semester task, and students are like, I know, teacher, I want to give up, So this is where we can help them, kind of prompting them to believe in themselves so that their self-talk can start changing, right? The other one is what Cross calls establishing a board of advisors. And I love this strategy because what Cross says is that as people, we need to have, imagine a board, una junta directiva, right? A board of advisors. So you need to have a board of advisors for your life as an educator, as a wife, as a husband, as a daughter, as a brother, sister, etc. So we need to have, ideally, and this has to do with the negative self-talk that avoids us from persisting, right? Like makes us kind of give up. So if we have a board of advisors, we're going to have different people who give us perspective on a specific topic. So as educators, this is a way to support our own persistence, right? And for students, we can create activities where there are boards of advisors. So we can create an activity where, you give each student a role of a perspective. And then students have to work together to find a solution to a specific situation, case, whatever it is that you're working on, through different perspectives. So it works in two ways. The way, of course, the way that Cross proposes it is more personal, like with my people close to me, my best friend, my mom, my sister, my colleague, whatever. But we can kind of transfer it into the teaching area with how can we work with different perspectives to persist in a specific problem that we have to solve, for example. All right. Moving on to the next one, we've got striving for accuracy. And here the expression is practice makes permanent. So we don't want to focus on perfection. We want to, develop specific habits, skills to make them more permanent. And we can do this in many ways, but just to mention two. One of them is providing clear criteria from the start. So if we want our students to, strive for accuracy, as teachers, it is our responsibility to allow them to, or to give them the information as clear as possible, so they know exactly what they have to do. Here's just an example of a task I'm working with teachers that they have to do with a guide, but it's anyway. So give them specific criteria. You need to do this, and this is what we're going to be checking, which connects to this task, this task, this task. Like clarity and criteria is important from the beginning, not at the end as a surprise, because that's what leads to inaccuracy in the learning process, right? So this is how we help our students become more accurate and understand that there are criteria for a task. What they need to develop is the ability to become autonomous in looking at going back to that criteria as they work in a task, so they can strive for accuracy. Yeah. And the other one is definitely normalizing errors as part of the learning process. And this connects to the mindset. This has to do with having a growth mindset, right? Believing that errors are part of the learning process, believing that it's normal for you to make a mistake. You need to make a mistake in order to move forward and to become accurate. You are not perfect from the first time you do a specific task. You need to draft. You need to make mistakes. You need to correct those mistakes, and then they will lead you to accuracy, right? But what does happen in our educational culture is that we don't manage the normalization of errors, or we don't make it as explicit as we should, because there is a culture of perfection. You need to do this right from the first moment, right? Like the task you give in has no drafts. It has to be perfect. And that's something that definitely I strongly believe it has to change. We need to normalize errors. And that's in our discourse. That's in what we tell students. When they make a mistake, you're like, awesome. So what did you learn from this mistake? And that's where we start reflection, right? And we move to the habit of thinking about your thinking, metacognition. So, all of many of these intertwine. All right. Another one is responding with wonderment and awe, right? And it's that ability to be curious, or to stay curious, to stay intrigued. And I think many of us might agree that our students kind of, I think they've lost their, I don't know, sometimes they kind of lose that wonderment. They're not surprised. They don't, I'm not sure. And maybe in the chat, you're reflecting about this, do you see that your students easily go into awe, like, wow? Or is it, becoming harder for them to get in that state of being curious and being intrigued? So here I want to share with you two strategies. One of them is planning playful lessons. I think one of my approaches in teaching, within the classroom has been to become as playful as possible and just, reconnecting to creativity, to engagement, to motivation, and to wonderment. So playful learning connects to just different emotions and sensations. So this is an example of, a game I designed about flipped learning in pandemic. I designed it physically, and then I moved it, I turned it into a physical game. And this is with teachers like you, right? This is in a workshop with educators. And I was just so surprised. Like, I kind of forget how that sometimes relies on something as simple as a playful element. So definitely plan. I would recommend plan playful lessons regardless of the age, right? If you teach high school, primary, you teach adults, you teach all of these at once, because we're sometimes here and there. Everyone gets that wonderment or that awe with playful elements. Just to give you an example, I have a couple things here since I'm on video. So little things. For example, when I group students, and I need actually to appear. There you go. So when I group students, I'll have, I'll use buttons. So I'll use colored buttons, and I go to the La Mina or those shops where you can buy things to fix clothes. So just giving a button instead of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, this gives a sensation of, wow, teacher, even if it's 2 seconds, but there's a level of, hey, interesting, or what are we going to do with this, right? And I also bought these, which are, I guess they're kind of like for the clothes, for hats, for jackets, I don't know. And so I use these also to group students. So I bought 4 of each. So I'll give these to students, and again, they'll be like, wow, teacher, can I keep it? I'm like, no, you can't, please don't. But there's, wow, there's something different. And so just like little things, I think, make a difference when we become playful, even with the physical elements. The other one is be unpredictable. If my classes are always the same, like I start the same way and then continue, and I have this structure and my students already know, they can almost quote me because I'm so predictable, well then, where's the wonderment going to go? There's not going to be any awe in the classes because that's what predictability is. There is no space for wonderment. So how can we become unpredictable? Trying new things, just, giving it a try. Of course, searching, hey, what are people doing? Participating in these types of forums or webinars are super important because that's where we learn from our process. I would love for educators in the comments, in the chat, if there are things that you do that create this awe, in students, share it. Like, what is it that you're doing that when you use it with students, you see the face of, oh, wow. Yeah. For me, it's using playing cards with university students, right? Like there's things that in higher education, students stop taking Play-Doh. Yeah. And they're like, oh, teacher, I've never, what? Like, we're not in kindergarten anymore. And then there's this awe. And then, of course, everything with the learning objective, clearly. All right. So that's in terms of this habit of thinking. The other one is taking responsible risks. Our mindset, or the way we think about risks, will put us in fixed or growth, right? So, no, I'm not going to risk that. What if I look stupid? What if I make a mistake? What if people notice that I'm not an expert, right? Like, I'm not going to take that risk. Or, okay, I'm going to give it a try, right? So here the recommendation is give things a try. It's responsible risks. It's not just go ahead and take crazy risks that can, affect your life career. No, take responsible risks. And this is a habit that we need to develop. And it definitely has so much to do with our beliefs about our own ability to do certain things. So here I want to recommend this. Okay, the first one is not, I would say, not so practical, but it is more like an invitation. For you, initially starting with you, the teacher, to recognize your fixed mindset triggers. Your fixed mindset triggers in terms of education, and this is what I'm showing you is based on Nottingham and Larson. What they tell us is educators tend to have triggers to put themselves in a fixed mindset. Like, no, I'm not going to change. No, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to risk. No, I'm not going to, no, I'm not going to give it a try. And that is when you receive unusual criticism Like when you're used to certain types of feedback and somebody gave you criticism that is like out of the ordinary and you're like, what? I've always been told that I do this great, for example, right? So then you won't take the risk. You'll just disregard it from your fixed mindset. You'll disregard it and you'll say like, no, le caigo mal. And that's why they're telling me this, right? Instead of, okay, I'm going to listen to that and take a risk to try something different, right? If it makes sense, of course. The other one is oversimplification. Sometimes we tend to literally oversimplify things that happen in our classes. For example, we had a test and 80% of the students failed. So oversimplification is, that's because students didn't study, right? Instead of putting the eye on me, okay, 80% failed this. What's going on? I'm gonna research and again take risks of maybe asking for feedback, which is a risk for the teacher who doesn't want to confront, right? What they're gonna say, etc. So again, right, oversimplification. Or educators suffer from imposter syndrome. I don't believe that my expertise is real. Maybe I feel like an imposter. Yeah, that's connected also to your mindset. Assuming that everybody else is to blame, and so I'm not going to take a risk to try anything out because that's not my fault, right? It doesn't have to do with me. Or losing control of a situation. This is very common in classroom management, right? So we're working with our students, and then the class gets out of hand, and then we're like, I'm not gonna do anything because those kids, they're just so misbehaved, instead of, hey, should I try something new? And that's the risk. Try something new. Give it a try. Take a responsible risk. So see how we connect this to our beliefs, and how our beliefs lead us as educators to avoid taking responsible risks in terms of this habit. And very possibly this transfers into our students, because then we don't open spaces for them to take responsible risks as well. So that connects to the second strategy, which is encouraging your students to take risks with your support. It's telling them, look, try it out. No, teacher, I'm terrible at no, teacher, I can't I don't like speaking in public. Okay. Let's give it a try responsibly. Take a responsible risk with the teacher support. Let's give it a try. What do you need? How can I help you get there? Because I know you can get there. There's your growth mindset talking, right, through you to your student. I know you can. I believe you can develop this public speaking skill. Let's look for strategies to do so. I'm going to make a safe space, or I'm going to, allow you to develop this skill with my support. All right. So those are the strategies for this habit. The other habit is creating, imagining, and innovating. I believe my screen is not showing. Yeah, I don't see the screen showing, but okay, maybe it is. So creating, imagining, and innovating. There you go. Again, so the sky's the limit. That's what they tell us, right? Like, you want to create, you want to imagine, you want to innovate, moonshot thinking, like reach for the stars, reach for the moon. The sky is the limit for whatever you want to do as an educator to innovate, or as a student in your classes to create, etc. However, the sky is the limit, or our minds are the limit. What are my beliefs about the possibilities of what I can do? I'm like, that's too difficult. Does my fixed mindset appear and tell me, no, that's not, no, we already tried that. We tried that, 5 years ago. We can't do that. Yeah. Like sometimes we get into this fixed mindset, like vicious circle of we can't do that. And so here it's important, to keep an open mind, to keep a growth mindset for ourselves and for our students so that they can create. And for this, I just want to share one strategy, and then I see there's an question in the chat, and I'll answer that one, which is sketchnoting. Something that I have discovered in the last, I think, 4 years, I guess, is a strategy that I have used to teach content as well as to, plan activities with students to demonstrate comprehensibility is to sketchnote. And sketchnote is to combine images and text to synthesize information, as you can see in the image below the title. So if we look at that message, so this is, and you might not know, but in this presentation, absolutely each sketch was made by me, right? To make a point of how we can push ourselves as educators to show things differently, which, require our mind to think visually, and make like visual and textual and comprehension connections, but also for our students. So we can use this strategy to teach, we can make a sketch note to teach an explanation instead of a mind map, or the mind map with sketches will become a sketch note, like with images, with doodles, right? But this has become a super successful strategy for my classes, for active learning as well as for flipped learning. So this is the strategy that I want to leave you with. And I want to just kind of read what the quote says. And the quote says, we must not think outside the box, we must destroy the box. And that's a message I want to leave you with. Like, how can we stop just moving out of the box, but actually, sometimes we just literally need to destroy that box and start, and do something completely different. And notice how this connects to the previous thinking habits. So this is the last one that I wanted to share with you. And I want to answer this, the question that I have here in the chat. And then what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to show you the other habits. If you want to go further into them, you could check them out. There's a website, it's called habitsofthinking.org, I think. And there you can find explanations, strategies, etc. So the question I see from Caterina Larcon is, what can be playful for teenagers? I mean, 11th graders. Catherine, anything. Take Play-Doh, take dice, take board games, take, anything. I've tried so many playful strategies with my university students that are your 11th graders, right? Your 11th graders that are in first semester or whatever. I think sometimes we believe that playful learning is only for children. And there's a lot of research that supports being playful in, all ages. And there are, new approaches that are coming out, like with Lego, there's different things that are coming out for businesses. So take Legos, take colors, sketchnoting. This is playful. The sketch note is a playful way of synthesizing information, thinking of images, and then drawing, because drawing is playful, right? So I can't think of course, I can't think of elements that wouldn't fit with teenagers. It's how you show them that applies to their age and to their interests, right? That it's not too childish. But I've taken Play-Doh and then they have to create something and they're like, I teach it, I love it. And then they use their English. So, take responsible risks, but try it out. Give it a try, right? And you might be very surprised. So I'm going to show you these last, my last sketches of these thinking habits, but I'm just going to mention them because, as I mentioned at the beginning, I was going to focus on specific ones, but I'm just here going to show you. So another one is thinking flexibly, and that connects a lot to what we've already mentioned in previous ones. And that last message of destroy the box. Applying past knowledge to new situations. That's something that I think is part of our pedagogical practice. Is very common. I think this is one of the most used or most developed thinking habits that students have. Gathering data through all senses. Like, how can we apply different types of senses, smell, touch, taste, etc., into our classes to collect data and talk about it, listen with understanding and empathy, right? Empathy, I think, has been a big topic these last years, with us being behind a screen, connected to students, in confinement, etc. And finding humor, right? So playful learning many times leads to finding like humorous situations or ways to laugh, right? Like, don't be so serious with don't be so hard on yourself. Chill out. Find the humor in the activities and in the things that you do. So with that, I want to leave you with a message, which is the last thinking habit, and it is remaining open to continuous learning. I think the fact that those of you who are connected here demonstrate this thinking habit, and it is, hey, I'm going to watch a webinar to learn about, thinking habits or thinking-based learning. And that's, this is the example of this last habit, remaining open to continuous learning, remaining in our growth mindset, understanding that we're not perfect and that there are so many ways that we can continue developing our own practice so that we can develop our students' skills, in this case, their thinking skills, in a more effective way. So thank you very much. This is my email. This is my Twitter account. I believe we have maybe a couple of 2-3 minutes. If there's a question or a comment, I'm going to take a look at the comments. Okay, so I see a question here from, I know there might be more, but I'm just here looking at, from Juanse Mejia. That says, how to encourage a great teaching and learning environment in schools with plenty of ICT tools. Okay, because he says, yeah, most are useful being done online. That's a really tough question, Juan, so thank you. I don't really know. Okay, that's a tough question because it's a very big question. Okay, I'm taking thinking time. I need to take a thinking time. So how to encourage a great teaching and learning environment in schools with plenty of ICT tools. The first thing that comes to my mind, Juanse, with that question that you have is, it has to be more about the aim of the tool than the actual tool. Like, do you have clarity of what you're going to use it for? And if it's connected to a clear learning objective, then that's what's going to encourage the actual great teaching or learning of the environment. If it's just using the tool for the sake of the tool, that's, a detractor of actual effective learning or meaningful learning. I think something, and that's for a whole other webinar, but you can think, I have encouraged educators that I've been working with to think hybrid. So some tools are really useful online. How can I kind of convert them into the physical? Like, how can I look at these tools through my face-to-face classroom eyes, or my face-to-face teaching glasses or lens. And that's where I can start making decisions. Most tools, if students have devices, work, right? Like, you can use Google Forms or whatever, and then on their devices, they can do the same. But there are some that will apply or not. So it's a lot about what is the objective, and does the tool that works very well online, could it apply face-to-face through, direct connection through devices or computers in the classroom, or is it going to lose, the whole sense of using it? And then, there it's just better not to do that. Yes, I'm not sure I answered that question as complete as possible because it's very complex, but yeah, definitely focus on the aim more than the tool. Yeah. All right. So I believe we are done today. Thank you, everybody, for connecting to this session. And I hope the links that I've shared with you, you find them very useful. And thanks to Santillana for this invitation for today and Uno Y.
El agua es ciencia.
Es música.
Es matemática.
Es emoción.
Es lenguaje.
Es arte.
Es el futuro.
La comprendemos de maneras distintas, tantas como las formas en las cuales podemos interpretar el mundo. Mi amigo Pablo, mi amiga Ana y yo pensamos diferente, aprendemos diferente y esto nos hace únicos. Y tú, papá, mamá, lo sabes.
Somos curiosos por naturaleza y queremos aprender. En el colegio descubrimos cosas nuevas y hacemos proyectos basados en el mundo actual para entender cómo resolver los retos que nos proponen los maestros o que proponemos nosotros.
Uno Y nos lleva a vivir una experiencia de aprendizaje emocionante. Y tú, papá, mamá, nos acompañas en este camino para ir descubriendo en qué somos buenos e ir explorando lo que queremos ser.
Con Uno Y tendremos diferentes experiencias con la tecnología para conectar con el mundo y así aprender de formas emocionantes y retadoras para estar preparados para el futuro en un mundo lleno de tecnología.
Uno Y me ayuda a conocerme mejor, a descubrir mis talentos y a entender por qué el miedo, el estrés, la alegría, la ansiedad y otras emociones afectan mi forma de aprender.
Hablar en inglés es maravilloso porque puedo comprender mejor el mundo, entender las películas y la música en su idioma original. Me puedo comunicar con personas en todo el mundo, hablar con ellos, conocer sus intereses y compartir experiencias juntos.
Lo que me gusta de Uno Y es que nos enseña a resolver situaciones con los métodos de la vida profesional. Nos muestran cómo se define un problema y luego los pasos que hay que seguir para solucionarlos, gracias a una plataforma que nos guía y a la ayuda de nuestros profesores.
Además, aprendemos con sofisticados simuladores de laboratorios virtuales que incentivan nuestro pensamiento científico, lógico y matemático, con actividades gamificadas en situaciones reales.
¿Y saben qué es lo que más me gusta? Que puedo ser un creador de tecnología, con experiencias que me permiten descubrir mis habilidades para el futuro, de la mano de la robótica, el pensamiento computacional, la ciencia, la tecnología, la ingeniería, el arte y las matemáticas. ¡Es increíble!
Uno Y le facilita a tus hijos la inmersión en la cultura digital.
Por medio de pedagogías activas como el aprendizaje cooperativo, la indagación, el aprendizaje basado en proyectos y el aprender haciendo, involucrando la robótica, los diarios de aprendizaje y la programación, entre otros, para conectar con sus intereses.
Vivamos juntos esta gran experiencia.